And I want to bring back to the stage Rudi Dolezal, who has directed and produced more than 1,000 music videos, 500 documentaries, 500 concert films, as well as Freddie Mercury, The Untold Story. So please come on back, Rudi. So I've got a number of questions of my own, and then we have some time for questions from the audience. So I guess just to sort of get started and contextualize things, Ben, do you want to talk, Rudi, do you want to talk a little bit about how you and Nick work together? Nick Broomfield, who's the co-director of this film.
Yes. First of all, thank you very much for staying. I had the privilege of working with Whitney Houston from her first album, 1984-85, and then had an intensive filming experience in the year 99, where she saw my film on Freddie Mercury and on the Stones and said to me, "I want you to do a film like this about me." And I said, "Okay, we can start tomorrow." And she said, "Okay, fine, tomorrow, 12 o'clock, Hyatt Hotel Cologne." And this is where all this footage started. There was no record company, no management, no nothing involved. And then the whole thing, for various reasons, which are too complicated, sat and was never released. And Nick Broomfield was the last one. I mean, then Whitney died. And Mr. Clive Davis called me, with whom I worked a lot, and I'm probably the only one who said no to Clive Davis and is still alive, because he wanted to buy the footage, and I said no. And then the company of Oprah Winfrey called me, and I said no. I said, "I'm not an agency, I'm a filmmaker." And when I was sitting with Whitney, I was promising her to do a film like I do my films. So the whole thing was parked, or actually forgotten, and I actually wrote it off. And then very late in the game, a certain Mr. Nick Broomfield came along and said, "Why don't we do this film together?" And I said, "Well, that's an interesting, different approach." It was a filmmaker to filmmaker approach, and this is how the whole thing actually then went and started.
And what was the collaboration like once you did get started?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I feel very privileged. I feel very honored to have that Nick Broomfield asked me, because I think to me he's a legendary documentary filmmaker. I'm the junior here, although I'm an old guy myself, and it was an honor for me to work with him. Some people might see that this is a maybe little bit different Nick Broomfield film than other Nick Broomfield films, but that's for everybody to judge. We had a great time together, not only making the film, but also going around the world to all the different film festivals. And I love the guy, and he can't be here for a very personal thing tonight, otherwise he would be here. And then it might be possible that we do something together again.
And Ben, can you talk a little bit about how you got involved in this project?
Yeah, Nick and I had worked together in London, involved in putting together a number of his films, including Kurt and Courtney, which hopefully some of you got to see. And I'm a huge fan of Nick's, and he had recently done a documentary for HBO as well, and he approached me about wanting to do Whitney as a subject. And I immediately thought of Showtime as an ideal partner for America and potentially the world. And we began to talk about how we could approach it. And one of the keys is the music. And the first time in the film, when you see Rudi's extraordinary footage of her fanning out her wings and, you know, belting that song out, the iconic music, and connecting to it, you have to have that song, otherwise you can't make the movie. So Showtime put that challenge on us, and together we, sought out ways in which we could include that music and make it happen. And they wanted to do the film, and one of the key elements, and you can tell with Rudi, who is extraordinarily emotionally connected to this material and actually held the camera, didn't just film sometimes, but didn't just direct the film as it were, was that we wanted to honor and recognize the the talent, because so many people have, I think, metastasized Whitney into a drug addict, into all these things that disconnect from why she was such a glorious, extraordinary talent and ephemeral artist. And I think this film uniquely demonstrates all of what made her who she was and what enabled her, sadly, her own self-destruction. And Nick is an extraordinary filmmaker and brilliantly knew he needed to partner with Rudi to execute and deliver on the promise we made to our distribution partners.
And this is for either one of you. What surprised you the most about making this film about Whitney?
Oh my God. First of all, I think after I'm in the business for 41 years. And when this happened with Whitney in the 99, 2000, I sort of felt that it was special. And what I learned through working with Nick was, because I was sort of the guy who was very close to her, and he was the guy who had the distance view on her, which I think was a very good combination. And it's not always a good combination if two directors work together. In our case, I think the result is quite okay. And I'm very happy with it. And what I learned through working with him is that she really could have been saved, because I was not so much aware of her substance problem. Because when maybe she was hiding it from me or whatever, I was with Freddie Mercury and we did like 4 grams of blow one night and a whole bottle of vodka. So I'm used to see people in the eye who have taken substances. 100 years ago, and I've of course finished and stopped all that. But it wasn't so obvious. And I just saw always a person who was giving everything she had. When I was with her on tour, I saw and filmed 40 or 50 concerts, and every night she was giving everything for 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And I sometimes had the feeling that on stage she really was at home. She didn't want to go off stage, because on stage she was with the voice and everything, she felt fine. And so the whole drug thing was not so obvious. I never ever even was even watching her or anything. So, but that she could have been saved. This whole story of the bodyguard, which Nick was researching, it's exclusive in the film, and it's Nick's work to have dig that out, is so compelling. There's a guy who says, this is what we have to do, and and then they say, okay, we fire you. They don't say, come in and let's save Whitney. No, they say, we fire you. And everybody who is still in the Whitney Houston estate and the family and whatever, they have to every day how can they look themselves into the mirror every morning and not being able to say, we've done everything we could. Everything? Next question.
Were there any people you had hoped to get in the film but weren't able to end up getting?
No, Nick was. I was interviewing for my various Whitney projects, very famous people, but Nick and I agreed that we didn't want to make this film about superstars who are talking about Whitney, but those people who were close to her. The only thing is that I did a long interview with Mr. Clive Davis, and then he didn't sign the release form, so he's not in the film. But Bobby Brown is in the film, Robin Crawford is in the film. In a documentary like this, you cannot interview everybody this year. If people are saying valid things in an interview that I did, for example, a few years ago, that's fine. It serves the purpose of telling the story. In that respect, I don't think that Nick and I have the feeling that anybody is missing.
Has Robin seen the film, do you know?
I am in contact with Robin, and Robin is living a different life these days. And I have to say that I respect Robin a lot. Without Robin, my footage would not have happened. I'm saying this over and over again. I don't know. I hope she hears it sometime. And I visited her 2-3 years ago. Was actually inviting her to be part of the project, but I had to respect. She lives a different life, and she has a partner. She's in a relationship with another woman, and they have twins. And she has moved on, and I know that she and Whitney had a very, very special relationship, and we have to give her the chance to live her life. And she decided that she doesn't want to talk about Whitney anymore, for reasons that we just have to accept, and that's what I'm doing.
Ben, what are the sort of unique challenges of a project like this for you as a producer?
Well, figuring out the route in to get the footage and material you need to tell this story when so many people are worried you're going to hijack them or bastardize their viewpoints or come after them. And Nick Broomfield versus, Rudi's historiography and biography is associated with taking people down. And so when just hearing his name associated with a film does scare certain people to not have access or release material or go on camera. And I think some of the brilliance in putting the film together is finding footage and partners who already captured the people in their own voice in the moment that were the inciting incidents of the issues that Whitney then faced later on in her life. And I think that Oprah interview with Whitney's mother was one of the aha moments. And I remember Nick calling me with the news that we had that footage, but had you called in a more normal way and just said, hey, Mrs. Winfrey, do you want to give us this footage in this way? We want to do X, Y, and Z. It probably wouldn't have been licensed. But in the way in which Nick brilliantly and his researchers and producers and Rudi's underneath them were able to get these rights secured without having, as a piece of a puzzle, without having to show the whole finished puzzle, is a real art of filmmaking. And there are a couple of those aha moments in this film that really support this extraordinary narrative. And I love the title as well, because I think you leave this film realizing how religion played a factor in the choices Whitney made, how her upbringing clearly played a profound factor, how Bobby played a profound factor, how the fame machinery played a profound factor, how gender politics played a profound factor, how gay rights or no gay rights at the time played a profound factor. And that's the brilliance of Rudi and Nick's storytelling and building those pieces one by one. And you don't know necessarily the finish as you start, but you find these treasure troves that help you connect those dots, and you go, wow, we have something here that's extraordinary. And clearing the music similarly was one of those incredibly important elements to this film. Otherwise it doesn't work, because if you don't showcase this woman's extraordinary gift, a gift from God, you don't get to tell the story that celebrates that while bemoaning the absolute destruction of it.
We're sitting here very relaxed tonight, but 3 hours before the world premiere at the Tribeca Film Festival, and the 3 days before, the estate, Clive Davis, the family tried with $1 million lawsuits to stop the film. And I had to spend my Easter holiday in court fighting a complete absurd lawsuit, which of course I won. But that just shows you how afraid the people are, which should be in charge. And because I was working with the estate for more than 2 years and thought you can work with them, until they said, well, Robin Crawford is not in the film. Bobby Brown is not in the film. I said, excuse me, I'm an independent filmmaker. I'm not used to somebody telling me what to do. I mean, we can discuss things. So long story short, with the estate, there was no common grounds, but that they then turn around and try to sell Whitney's Grammys, which I, as a governor of the Recording Academy, of course stopped, because you cannot sell a Grammy. A Grammy belongs to the person who got the Grammy. And you cannot sell a Grammy or buy a Grammy around the corner like you buy, I don't know, 10 grams of cocaine. Shows you what
not in Southampton. Just
No. I'm just saying. I mean, this is just unheard of. You know, somebody owns, or an Oscar. Somebody owns something, and then that shows you how this estate is ticking. And when I heard that, I wasn't surprised that they and the estate and myself, we didn't come together. Sorry if I'm sort of into some taboos that you don't say in the Hamptons. I'm sorry, but I stopped everything 100 years ago. So I mean, I'm not.
So I just
even stopped smoking.
Oh well, you've really gone clean. I've got one or two more questions, and we have time for some questions from the audience.
I mean, cigarettes.
Well, of course, of course. So you've worked with Rudi, the Rolling Stones, Bono, U2, Queen, Miles Davis, Quincy Jones, Billy Joel, Norah Jones, Bruce Springsteen, Genesis, Elton John, and on and on. I'm curious if there are any singers or musicians these days that you feel like have some of what Whitney Houston had.
Obviously not. Whitney Houston for me is in the top range of maybe 3 female singers of pop culture. And I don't mean pop music, but pop culture. And the interesting thing that I realized, and I will never forget, is when she was in my editing room in Vienna one day to approve a little video we did, and it went much quicker than we thought, and it was a rainy Sunday afternoon, and I remember it as if it was yesterday. And after like 10 minutes, it was done. And she says, well, what else can I do now? And Robin Crawford was with her. What can we do now in Vienna? And I said, I have no idea. But since you're in my edit suite, why don't you, can I show you some other of my work? And she says, well, what do you have? And I just finished Freddie Mercury, The Untold Story. It was 99. And I said, Freddie Mercury. And she says, oh my God, Freddie Mercury, I'm a big fan. And I said, why is Whitney Houston a fan of Freddie Mercury? But thinking about it, they're both 2 great voices. And of course, they respected each other, or even, adored each other. Thinking about that, there is a few big names where you, as a filmmaker, or I, are privileged to be the one who is chosen to, do that as good as you can. There is a lot of work with Freddie Mercury that I think is quite okay, and there is this work with Whitney Houston and others with the Stones, but there is not really a favorite artist or a favorite song, or because they're all my children. All those little projects are, and the mistakes I made were important that I got better the next time. So thinking about that, I think that Whitney Houston is a one-off, was a one-off, and the reason why, I mean, you might ask yourself, here is this woman, she was so beautiful, had such a great voice, she had a lot of money at times. I mean, I was there when she was signing a deal for $100 million. I mean, how can you spend $100 million? I mean, maybe there's some people in the room who tell me, I have no idea, but still, she died broke, But I have my theory. Why did this go wrong? Why was this the tragic, the Greek tragic thing that you cannot? I mean, if you would have written it down, you would have said, "Oh my God, this is too much." And the daughter dies the same way. No. But it happened, And my theory is having worked with Freddie or Keith Richards, who is still a good friend of mine, all those artists are always told you cannot go over this line. And then as an artist in their artistic life, they go over that line. When Freddie Mercury was told that Bohemian Rhapsody has to be 3 minutes and it was 7, he said, excuse me, can I say this here? Fuck you, it's 7 minutes, and it became a world hit. So he, all the limits, but there is one aspect in life where you cannot go over the line, and that's your health. And that's very difficult to learn for an artist and I think Whitney thought, I'm gonna get away with it. Yeah, I do this, I do that. She was smoking cigarettes. I mean, her voice was her instrument. She was smoking cigarettes, 2 or 3 packs. Apart from everything else, that was devastating, for a singer. She thought she gets away with it, and she didn't. And when she realized and saw, oh my God, I'm not getting away with it, it was too late. Still, she's one of the best singers ever, and I love her to death.
We do have time for a few questions from the audience, in case anybody has any questions. Yes? Questions about who you had to deal with from the family?
We didn't need any permission. I mean, I was dealing with Pat Houston for many years. I was dealing with Donna Houston before. Since they sued me, I can say very arrogantly, they are both very incompetent. Although they, they didn't know how to take care of a jewel like Whitney and what she did. Nick and I didn't have to go. I mean, he did the most important thing, the music clearances, which had nothing to do with the estate, because unfortunately, as you know, Whitney never wrote an own song in her whole life. All the songs that she was singing was by somebody else. So the music copyrights and the writers and whatever.
Yeah, because Rudi had filmed not the masters. They weren't coming from the albums. They were coming from the concerts.
Which was an advantage.
And then you were able to go get the publishing rights from the writers or the publishing houses that controlled those rights, which enabled it to happen. And he had cleared all the footage of the interviews at the time, or they were cleared by other people who, in clearing them, had the licensing rights to then license them to us.
So there was no need to, I mean, I was trying to work with them for 2 years because I thought the estate is like the legitimate...
It was my first phone call also.
Really?
Was to Clive, to say, and they were working on and our point was, this is going to celebrate her talent, you should be involved, but then they wanted to, at the time, pursue, which they probably are, a scripted motion picture. Which I'm sure is something that will take 10 years to happen.
Yes, right there.
It's a great film, and it started off, and you said, where you see the line that mentioned Whitney didn't die from an overdose, she died of a broken heart, and I wondered if, in the background of why you want to make this film, if you want to change the public vision of why she died, from other family members and friends mentioning the tabloids and all this awful statements of her being a drug addict or a crack addict.
No, good question. When Nick asked me to be part of this, I said, one thing is my wish. Whatever on inconvenient truth and on things we tell in this documentary, at the end, I want the people still to love Whitney Houston at the end of this film. And we also agreed that it would be a big pity if the only thing that is remembered is her drug overdoses and her excesses and scandals and what have you, because she was, after all, or she is forever one of the greatest voices of pop culture. And to, as Mick Jagger would say, the fine line that we tried to do, I hope we made it.
Yes, right there.
Clive Davis sat with you for an interview, and then you think the estate had something to do with him not signing?
No, Clive Davis sat with me with an interview, and he said, Rudi, this project is in good hands. 6 hours we did an interview, and then they decided to do a project on their own, and therefore he sort of didn't give his consent. And I didn't want to, I mean, actually sitting down for an interview is already a consent. He would never have won any lawsuit, but I know Clive Davis for many years, and I didn't want to go into the situation of having to go to court with Mr. Clive Davis. He, in fact, is also very, very crucial and important in Whitney's career. Let's not forget that. With the people that he chose and the songs that he chose, etc., he was a very, very, very important factor. There's no doubt about it. But he chose not to be part of that, and that's his choice.
Yes, all the way in the back.
That's the one person I wanted to ask you about. Clive Davis, you don't really put much stock in his participation in her demise. Do you think he had a role equal to the other people co-stars?
I think Clive was quite talented in presenting everything he did for Whitney Houston in many different ways, also in his own documentary, which was shown. So Clive Davis, see, people who were willing to participate, of course, had more chance to tell their stories. And people who didn't participate, I mean, Clive Davis is in there, there's a whole segment about him, but that's all we thought is appropriate.
Yes, right there.
At the end of the film, Robin says that when she was most women in her laughter, and I'm wondering what you was
What I miss? In all those years working with her, and she was always a giver. She was always somebody who was giving. And I think if anything can be added to the very good quote of the backing vocalists that she died of a broken heart, is that she died because she was giving too much and she was not receiving enough. So that's what I have in mind. She was the big giver. She was helping a lot of people financially, morally, in many, many ways. And she was always in a good mood, and she was never the diva, you know, when we were filming. She was never that complicated diva. That Whitney was a very nice person.
Yes, right there.
Oh my God. Yes, there was tension between Bobby and Robin, and if I tell you why I think Robin left the whole Whitney camp, you will be very surprised. Because I think Robin Crawford left the Whitney camp because she loved Whitney Houston. She was not. Say it again? I was not in her brain. What I can tell you is that Robin, I think, and this is I have never asked her, but this is my conclusion after having thought about this many times. She saw that Whitney has a husband and they had a child together. And when it became more and more difficult, Robin, I think, thought that the only way that Whitney can solve this is within the marriage. And that would mean that she would step aside. And I just know Robin as a very, very honest and great and wonderful person. So I'm just, maybe it's my wishful thinking, but I'm just saying that she's so great that she thought, I love her so much, I have to step aside.
We have time for one more question. Sorry, in the blue shirt over there.
I just say Ella Fitzgerald and I leave the third one open, okay?
I want to just thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank Kat, our hardworking intern, for helping us tonight. I want to thank the White Fences Inn for their generous support, and I want to thank Rudi Dolezal and Ben Silverman so much for coming out and sharing this film with us. Thank you.